Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I'm hanging out amongst my album collection, answering the questions that you asked me about the music I love. Things like what album means the most to me, what was the first album I ever got, and a number of other things that you asked me on Instagram. And yes, I am still going strong with the CD collection. I even still buy the occasional CD, as the place that I listen to music the most, my 2010 Toyota Corolla, only has a CD player. But before we get to it, this video is brought to you by my patrons. Doing YouTube for a living has its ups, it has its downs, as you are essentially working for an invisible boss called the YouTube algorithm that one day loves you and the next day hates you. Patreon is an online tip jar of sorts, and having you guys involved in it over the years has provided a sense of stability that allows me to keep doing what I do. If you'd like to get involved over there, I offer a number of rewards, things like early access to videos, a patron's discount for my merch and courses, I put out the tabs for the music I make, that kind of thing. You can find more at patreon.com/samuraiguitarist. I'll also put up links in the description. But anyways, let's get to it and see what you guys asked me. To kick things off, Diddy the Worsick asks, which album do I wish I would have participated in? Okay, I'm going to go with Tom Petty's Full Moon Fever. Not only is this one of my favorite albums of all time, but I feel like stylistically, I may have been able to contribute a guitar part here or there had you plot me down in the studio with Tom Petty, Jeff Lynne and the boys. Whereas had I been invited to the session where Sir Simon Rattle recorded Stravinsky's Firebird Suite, it would be a total deer in the headlights type situation. On top of that, I recently read this book, Conversations with Tom Petty, where he talks about his life and the music that he made. And it sounds like during the recording of Full Moon Fever, everyone was just in a good place, having a good time, and it sounds like it would have been something that would have been very fun to be part of. Next up, my man Arnold Plays Guitar, who has a wonderful YouTube channel, I might add, asks, if I were to take an imperfect album, remove half the songs, and create the most killer EP ever, what album would that be? I'm going to go with Stadium Arcadium by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I really like the band. I think it's a very good album. I saw them twice when they were touring this. However, I feel like there is some filler on here, and had they removed the weakest songs and kept only the best ones, and instead of doing a double disc, they just did a single disc, it would be an all-time classic versus just a pretty good album. Ziegler Stone asks, what's my favorite album from the 2010s? Okay, I am specifically limiting my answers to things that I have in my record collection, and I bought most of these pre-2010s. But there are two albums that come to my mind. One of them is Jason Isbell's Southeastern. There are a lot of things that I really don't like about country music, and if you were to boil all of those things down into one album and then take the opposite of it, it would be this record. The other one from the last decade that comes to mind is this one here, Pup, The Dream Is Over, recorded in 2016. These guys are thrashy pop punk. It's super angry, but super good and catchy as well. It kind of reminds me of the music that made me want to play guitar in the first place, but with its own unique spin. So, best albums in my collection from the 2010s, those two guys right there. Brandon Soriano asks, what's an album that I love from a genre that I'm not usually a fan of? And this one's tough. There aren't a lot of genres that I actively dislike, and usually if I love a specific album from that genre, it'll just lead me deeper into it. Oh, I know. The soundtrack from the South Park movie. I know every song off this by heart. When I was in grade 7, I think it was, me and my buddy snuck into this, and it was honestly the best movie experience I've ever had in my life. I've never been to a theater where just the entire collective of people watching it was laughing so hard the entire time. So while I really don't like musicals, if Trey Parker and Matt Stone made that musical, like the South Park movie, I do in fact like it. Bobby Franks asks, if I could see any artist play any album live start to finish, what would it be? Well, the only time I've actually seen a band play an album start to finish live was when the Tragically Hip played Fully Completely all the way through on the second last time that I ever saw them. So that wouldn't be the answer because I've already seen them do that. My brain is telling me that it should be Electric Ladyland by Jimi Hendrix because of the legend factor. However, my heart is saying this one here. Paul Simon's Graceland. This album is just so good, So happy. It's one of my favorites, and the band on it is like a totally unique experience, I think. Hearing Ladysmith Black Mambazo and all those guys from South Africa play this album live start to finish would have been just, I think, as far as like a pure listening experience, I think that would be the one that would be most pleasurable. Also, in my opinion, this is the ultimate dad album, and now that I'm a dad, I enjoy it even more. Roman VTS asks, did any album genuinely shift how you perceive the artist or even music as a whole? There is a very clear answer for this one for me, and that is John Mayer's Continuum. Before hearing this album, I thought that John Mayer was just a dweeb with an acoustic guitar singing songs about bodies being wonderlands. But then I heard this, and the guitar sounds just hooked me right in. The songwriting is amazing. The production is world class. It's a perfect 10 out of 10. A complete masterpiece. From the moment that I heard this onwards, I've been on the John Mayer fanboy train and have been loving the ride ever since. All right, this guy asks, do I prefer music or photo albums? Well, let me answer it like this. This is my album collection, and this is my photo album collection. FX Stino asks, which album do I wish I could hear for the first time again? Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction. When I was in grade 11, this was basically on repeat in my Discman. Historically, it's been one of my favorite albums. I think I've probably learned all the songs at some point, but I've heard the hits from this so many times on the radio that I never need to hear Sweet Child of Mine, Welcome to the Jungle, or Paradise City again, which is a shame, and I would love to hear this through fresh ears again. Lama Blackberry asks, which album reminds me of a bad memory? John Frusciante's Nyandra de la Days and Usually Just a T-Shirt. This is the solo album that he recorded when he was deep in the throes of addiction, and it is disturbing, it's haunting, it's very raw and emotional with moments of sheer brilliance. It's like a window into the soul of a deeply broken and hurt person. So while I've never actually experienced anything close to what John was going through when he made this, when I listen to it, it just kind of reminds me of the unhappiest moments of my life, because that's what it sounds like. Raish Choss asks, do I own any rare or super cool editions of albums? As far as valuable goes, I don't think so. I never really collected with that kind of thing in mind. However, in my dad's vinyl collection, which is downstairs, I do believe that there are some things like that. As far as rare goes, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff by podunk nobody musicians that are only rare because nobody ever cared about them, but they're definitely not valuable. Sloan Crewer asks, what was my first album? That would be REM's Document. Not the specific CD, but a friend of mine made me a copy of his cassette, and I would listen to it over and over in my Walkman when I was like 10 years old. And I remember that was the first time that I ever just felt something strong towards music. As far as the first CD I bought that I still have, that would be NoFX's Pumpkin Drublick. This is the kind of stuff that made me want to play guitar. This is an amazing record. If you know, you know. Luke Peach asks, how many albums do I own? 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 50 or so CDs on each rack. There are 9 racks, so 500 or so. If you imagine that each CD cost about $15, I would have spent $7,500 on all these CDs. Imagine if I just bought Spotify Premium and put all that money in Dogecoin. Richard DeZerga asks, what is my least favorite album from my favorite artist? Love me some Led Zeppelin. Don't particularly love me some Presence, which I believe is their last studio album. The best song on here is Achilles' Last Stand, which is pretty good, but it's 10 minutes and 22 seconds when it should have been 4 minutes. Eyelashes 2 asks, which album have not enough people heard? Without a doubt, that's going to go to Matt Mays and El Torpedo. Bunch of rock and roll hosers from the Canadian East Coast. This is one of my favorite albums of all time. Probably top 5. I've listened to it so many times over the last 16 years and keep coming back to it. Of every album I own, this one just sounds like home to me. It's the folky, rocky, Canadiana stuff that, at the root of me, is the music that I love the most, and it's executed absolutely perfectly. If that kind of stuff sounds good to you, I would highly recommend checking it out. On a related note, J Easter 7013 asks, what my favorite underrated album besides Maddie Mays and El Torpedo is. Apparently I've talked about this one before. Let's go with Sam Roberts Band, Chemical City. This is just good-hearted, soulful Canadian rock and roll. Every song on here is a song that I love. It's an album that I will happily be listening to when I'm 100 years old, rocking in my rocking chair. Guardian of the Something asks, how long is my hair? My man, when I asked you guys to ask me questions about my record collection, that was not what I had in mind. Laffy Taffy 426 asks, what is the best Jimi Hendrix album? I'm gonna go with Electric Ladyland. Which one is that? This one here, because the song All Along the Watchtower is one of my favorite songs ever recorded, as well as it features one of my favorite guitar notes ever played, which is that high one that he hits a bunch of times right at the end of the song. So, best Jimi Hendrix album ever recorded, according to old Sammy G, Electric Ladyland. Sunny Makes Music asks, which album did I not initially like, but absolutely loved later in life? Ooh, good question. Bela Fleck and the Flecktones, Live at the Quick. So I have this buddy, his name is Al, and he's always been a bit of an old soul, which was reflected in the music that he likes. So when we were kids, like 15 or 16, this was one of his favorite albums. I would call this album weird jazz and stuff because it's just like really good, but weird compositions featuring electric banjo, syntax drum guitars, affected sopranos, and a whole bunch of other crazy stuff. So when he first got his license, he was the first of us to get his license, we would drive around with the windows down in his mom's Volvo listening to this album. And I remember saying to Al, like, dude, we are never going to get girlfriends listening to Bela Fleck Live at the Quick pumping out of your mom's Volvo. Can we at least put on Guns N' Roses or something? However, later in life, I came to appreciate how amazing this album is. It features some of the best musicians ever to pick up their instruments. This one, because at first it didn't get us girlfriends, but now I don't care about that, and I love it. A lot of people ask me this one, what is my favorite album cover? That would be the Mars Volta Amputecture. I love all of their artwork, but I specifically like this one. I mean, look at that. How cool is that picture? That massive baby man thing. The next question is, what's the album that influenced my playing the most? That's got to be Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble. Texas Flood. I don't really do a whole lot of blues stuff anymore, but this is the album that grabbed me and convinced me that all I ever wanted to do was play guitar. My guitar teacher lent it to me when I was 15, 16 or so, and then I went and bought my own copy and spent the summer learning as many licks as I could off of it. It was such an important point in my musical development that I feel like had I never heard this album, I would have been a much different guitar player now. Michael Dustin asks, what album, in my opinion, has the best and worst song comparatively? Well, the Beatles' White Album has such brilliant songs as Blackbird, contrasted with Wild Honey Pie. It has amazing songs like While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and then there's Revolution No. 9. So, gotta be this one for me. J. Jude CZ asks, what is the most plain album cover you've ever seen before? Kazako asks, which album have I bought the most times? Dr. Dre's The Chronic came out when I was 14 and I bought it. Then a few years later, I decided that I only wanted to listen to classic rock, so I traded it in. And then in my adulthood, I realized that I couldn't live unless I owned this album, so I bought it again. I think this is the only album that I've ever bought twice. Jam Bob 7000 asks, what is my least favorite album? Well, Jam Bob, there are a number of albums in my collection that are absolute, complete trash, but I'm not going to name them. When I was younger, I used to go down to Nashville regularly to go to writing clinics and seminars and networking events, stuff like that, when I was trying to figure out what I was doing with myself as a musician. Now, at these events, you'll meet a lot of other musicians who are at varying stages of their musical journey with varying degrees of skill. And so my fellow event attenders, bless their hearts, they would hand out their CDs to anyone who would take them. I would always take them and listen to them on the long car ride home. And, well, let me say this. This was down in the South, so there is a lot of country, a lot of really, really bad country in my collection there. I'm not going to tell you who they are. That doesn't seem very nice, but I think you get the point. Chris Red 122 asks, are these my albums? They are. And do I regret buying them in this format? I wouldn't say so. The place that I've historically listened to music the most has been my car, and the 2 cars that I've had have only had CD players. Before that, I was just listening on my Discman. So it was either buy CDs or just not listen to this music at all. When I was a kid, my dad gave me his record collection, and through that, I discovered a ton of new music. So one day, hopefully, I will share all this stuff with my son, and I feel like there's something a little bit more intriguing when you actually have a tangible physical thing than versus just, sharing a playlist. However, come the day when I buy a new car, it will have Bluetooth, and that day I will probably sign up for Spotify Premium and never buy a CD again. Rye Hitch asks, what's the best album that I have with the worst production? This Robert Johnson album has amazing playing on it, great songs, but I hate to say it, it sounds like it was recorded 100 years ago. Mil Mingus says, what album has the most consistently good lead guitar? There are a lot of albums in the collection that could fulfill this criteria, but I'm going to go a little bit out of left field and pick Rat Attack Classics. It's an instrumental album, but there's no guitar solos. The guitar parts just play lead main melody lines, which is really cool and not a lot like anything else that I've heard. It's one of my favorite albums. The only thing that I regret with this one is the fact that I made a number of these songs my ringtones, which you should never do for your favorite songs. Logan Weist asks, what album is the most meh of all time for me? Oh man, I'm gonna get some hate for this one. But for me, it's Wilco Sky Blue Sky, which I also think is my brother-in-law's favorite album. So Kelly, if you're watching this video, I'm sorry. But with this one, all my friends who knew my musical taste kept telling me I needed to check this out. It was exactly like the stuff that I really liked. However, when I put it on, it just kind of made me feel eh. However, that was like 10, 12 years ago, and I haven't listened to it since. So I feel like it's time to give it another try. I'm going to set this one aside and listen to it next time I go for a drive. If you want to hear an update on my opinion, it will be the pinned comment. Miro Webb asks, which album do I have the strongest emotional connection to? Rust Never Sleeps by Neil Young. That is in this tube of albums that for one reason or another don't have a case. When I was young, I had this one friend, and we would go out to his cabin in the summer, and we would putt around in his boat listening to this specific record as we fished and got into whatever other trouble 13, 14-year-old teenagers get into. I think the case fell into the lake when we were horsing around on the boat, but this album just reminds me of my buddy. He passed away when I was in grade 11, and I used to listen to this quite a lot during that time to help deal with that sudden loss. So now, when I listen to it, it elicits a lot of happy memories, but also it reminds me of those sad memories of going through a tragic, devastating loss like that for the first time. And last for today, Cinder1112 asks, what the best album to help with a breakup is? I need it right now, sad face. If it's a sad breakup, I'm going to say City and Color, Bring Me Your Love. It's a good one to get your cry on to. If it's a mad breakup, can't go wrong with some Howlin' Wolf. I mean, what's the blues about, right? And if it's the kind of breakup where you want to go to a dance club and boogie it up with some random strangers, I'm going to recommend Budos Band 2. In all seriousness though, I'm sorry you're going through this. It sucks, but you will come out the other side and you will get through it. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. That is the music that I love. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope maybe you've discovered some new music that you can go and check out. A special shout out to everyone who supports my channel on Patreon. Without you guys, I would be partying out my CD collection and selling it for pennies on eBay. But really, it does make a huge difference in what I do. If you want to swing by the tip jar and drop a tip in the jar, you can do so over at patreon.com/samuraiguitarist. Thank you all for watching. If you want to check out another video like this one, hit that link up there. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell for notifications, and stay tuned for a wide range of musical content. Until next time, look after each other, look after yourselves, look after the planet, I'm Samurai Guitarist, and I'll see you again soon.